Most people are aware of Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers who helped establish the United States as an independent nation. He also served as the first Secretary of the Treasury under President George Washington. But most people's knowledge of his life stops there. You might know that he died in a duel against Vice President Aaron Burr. But what led up to that? What did he do during his life that was so controversial? And finally, how did this man with Caribbean origins become one of America's most influential founding fathers? Welcome to my channel! Today we will be exploring the real history of Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was born out of wedlock to a Caribbean woman named Rachel Fawcett and a Scottish father named James Hamilton, who was around 28 at the time. His parents were not married, but his dad stayed around for a couple of years after his birth and was actually listed on Alexander's birth certificate. However, when he was just 3 years old, his father abandoned the family and they fell into poverty. In order to support herself and her son, Rachel began working as a servant for a wealthy family on the island, while Alexander attended a local school where This was not enough to lift him out of poverty, though. So, at age 12, he got a job working for a merchant. At first, he worked by doing menial tasks such as portering, but eventually he became a clerk and then a bookkeeper. It was during this time that he would have learned skills that would later help him in his professional life. Tragedy struck again when Alexander was 14 and his mother died from complications after giving birth to his younger brother. Fortunately, the merchant he worked for took pity on him and agreed to allow him to live rent-free in one of the merchant's houses along with his sibling. Here, Alexander was able to finish his education and prepare for college. Despite having very little formal education due to his impoverished childhood, Alexander graduated from King's College, now known as Columbia University, in 1774. Just 4 years later, he would publish a series of essays known as the Continentalists, which argued for independence from Britain and urged the colonies to form a union. When the American Revolutionary War broke out, Hamilton joined the Patriot cause and wrote pamphlets to raise support for it. These writings caught the attention of George Washington, who appointed him as his aide. Hamilton would serve in this position until 1781, when he resigned due to controversy over his affair with Maria Reynolds. Speaking of his relationship with Maria, it all started when she came to him for financial assistance because she was being blackmailed over an affair she had with another man. At first, he paid the blackmailer to keep quiet, but soon he found himself growing infatuated with Maria. Unfortunately, she was already married. So instead of trying to pursue anything romantic with her, Hamilton used his connection to get her husband thrown into debtor's prison. Then he offered her and her sister Angelica a proposition. If they agreed to move to Philadelphia with him, he would pay off their debts and give them money every month as long as they pretended to be his wife. They agreed, but soon he found himself spending way more money than he anticipated on their lavish lifestyle. And to make matters worse, his cover was blown, and people began to question if his wife was really his sister. Afraid of losing his reputation, Hamilton returned to the war effort, which is when his affair with Maria was discovered by several members of Washington's staff. While they did not reveal what they knew to Washington, they did use it as leverage to blackmail him into becoming an aide. When he resigned from his position 2 years later, he returned to New York City, heavily in debt and in need of a new career. Luckily, he was well liked by many members of the Continental Congress, including John Jay and Robert Morris, who both recommended him for the position of Secretary of the Treasury. Although he was qualified for the job, President George Washington was hesitant to hire him because of his past. However, with encouragement from his cabinet, he decided to give Hamilton a chance. As Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton had a lot of responsibilities. He was in charge of setting up the entire financial system of the newly formed country. Under his leadership, the Treasury established a national bank and implemented a tax on whiskey to help pay off debts incurred during the Revolutionary War. He also created a mint and issued the first U.S. coins. In addition, he established the first credit rating system and introduced the concept of a stock market. Hamilton believed that a strong central government was essential to the survival of the nation. As such, he favored a strong federal government and supported the creation of a national bank. His economic plan involved selling bonds to the public in order to pay back the war debts and then taxing imports to help fund the government. Many of these ideas were unpopular, especially with southern states who felt that they would benefit from a weaker central government. In an effort to compromise, Hamilton agreed to relocate the nation's capital to the South in exchange for their support. While he was successful in implementing many of his ideas, he was not without opposition. One of his greatest rivals was Thomas Jefferson, who disagreed with almost everything Hamilton stood for. In fact, they debated so much that it caused political parties to form based on their ideologies. Hamilton's Federalist Party favored a strong central government and a close relationship with Britain. Meanwhile, Jefferson's Democratic Republicans wanted a weaker central government and closer ties to France. While they had many political enemies, none would be as dangerous as Aaron Burr. After serving as vice president under President Thomas Jefferson, Aaron Burr ran for the office of president in 1800. His opponent was incumbent Thomas Jefferson. In the election, which was decided by the House of Representatives, both candidates received 7 electoral votes. Eventually, the House voted for Jefferson, hanging Burr. On July 11th, 1804, he confronted Hamilton in a public place and challenged him to a topless hat duel. For those who don't know, a topless hat is a sword duel between 2 people where each person wears a hat with a red sash around the middle. It was common for the officers of opposing armies to engage in this type of combat before a battle to show their mettle. However, in this case, neither duelist had military experience. Despite this, Hamilton accepted the challenge, perhaps thinking he could win the fight easily, since his opponent was older and out of shape. As it turned out, he may have been right about Burr's physical condition, but he underestimated his determination. After the 2 met in the early hours of the morning, each man took an oath to kill or be killed. Then they engaged in a fight where they lunged at each other with their swords. According to witnesses, Burr was the first to strike, hitting Hamilton on the side of the head. However, Hamilton retaliated and wounded Burr as well. After this, both men returned to their boats. However, seconds later, Hamilton was mortally wounded when Burr plunged his blade into his stomach. It turns out that Burr didn't intend to kill Hamilton. Instead, he wanted to scare him off by lightly slashing his torso. However, during the fight, his hat slipped down over his eyes, preventing him from seeing what he was doing. When Hamilton's friends rushed over to his side, he told them, "It is useless to be angry. I have received a death wound. Tell my wife I love her. 1,000 pardons. My children, my dear good night." With that, he died at around 1 p.m. on July 12, 1804. As for Aaron Burr, he was put on trial for murder, but was acquitted on September 26, 1807. He lived to be 79 years old and died believing himself to be a martyr. Although he helped establish the United States as an independent nation and played a major role in shaping its early financial system, Alexander Hamilton's contributions to society are often overlooked. Perhaps this is because he was not perfect. He struggled with his personal finances and had an affair that resulted in a child out of wedlock. Additionally, he engaged in a highly controversial practice known as speculation, which involved buying large amounts of land on credit in the hopes that its value would increase. This practice caused him to lose $2 million in today's currency and damaged his reputation. Despite these flaws, Hamilton was a brilliant economist, and his ideas helped set the foundation for United States to become the world power it is today. Now it's time to hear from you. What did you find most interesting about Alexander Hamilton? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, be sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for watching. Sign up for the email list to stay up to date on future videos. And as always, have a wonderful day.